My name is Enoch. Not the Enoch who was taken by God, but an ordinary carpenter, as common as they come. My hands are rough as tree bark, with wood shavings forever embedded under my fingernails, and calluses on my palms thick as cowhide. Whenever I grip my tools, those calluses make a slight friction sound, like dry leaves whispering in the wind. It was a scorching afternoon, with the sun hanging like a massive fireball in the sky, baking the earth below. The air was thick with the smell of dry dust, occasionally carried by a breeze that brought the moist scent of distant rivers. I was in my workshop, completely absorbed in planing a piece of cedar wood, wood shavings curling and dancing beneath my plane, releasing the fragrant aroma of tree resin. The workshop was left to me by my father, with thick stone walls on all four sides and a roof woven from palm leaves. Wood of various types was stacked in the corners: olive wood, fig wood, poplar, cypress, each with its unique grain and fragrance. Tools hung neatly on the walls: axes, saws, chisels, planes, each one sharpened to perfection by my hands, gleaming in the sunlight. Suddenly, the workshop door was pushed open. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, backlit so I couldn't make out his features, only his broad shoulders and thick arms hanging at his sides. His footsteps were steady and deliberate, each step planted firmly, as if carrying some great mission. "Are you Enoch?" His voice was deep and powerful, carrying an authority I had never heard before. I set down my plane and wiped the sweat from my forehead with my sleeve. The sweat mixed with wood dust stuck to my forehead, causing some irritation. "Yes, I am Enoch. And you are?" He stepped into the workshop, and sunlight finally illuminated his face. This was a man who appeared to be in his 50s, with a graying beard, but his eyes held a determination that even young men lacked. His skin was darkened by the sun, with deep wrinkles on his forehead, marks left by years of contemplation and worry. His hands were large, with long fingers covered in calluses, clearly belonging to someone accustomed to physical labor. "My name is Noah," he said simply, then surveyed my workshop. His gaze lingered on each tool, as if evaluating something. "I've heard you are the finest carpenter in these parts." I felt my cheeks flush, unsure if it was from his praise or the stuffiness of the workshop. "You flatter me. I only do simple work, fixing doors and windows, making furniture and such." Noah walked over to a piece of wood I was working on and reached out to gently stroke its surface. His movement was tender, like caressing a child's cheek. "Is this gopher wood?" I nodded, somewhat surprised he could identify this type of wood. Gopher wood wasn't common. It was hard, beautifully grained, but expensive, rarely used by ordinary people for furniture. "Yes, it's for a chest commissioned by a wealthy merchant. He requested the finest wood." A gleam flashed in Noah's eyes as he turned to face me, his expression becoming serious. "Enoch, I want to ask you to help me with something unprecedented." Uneasiness surged in my heart, like the oppressive feeling before a storm. The air seemed to grow heavier, making breathing difficult. "What is it?" Noah took a deep breath, then slowly said, "I want to build a ship, a massive ship." I was stunned, wood shavings unconsciously sliding from between my fingers. "A ship? But we're several days' journey from the sea, and—" "I know this sounds absurd," Noah interrupted me, his voice carrying an incomprehensible firmness. But God told me that a great flood is coming to cover all the earth. Only this ship can save lives. I felt dizzy, as if the entire world was spinning. God? Flood? These words echoed in my mind like thunder reverberating in an empty valley. I gripped the workbench, feeling the rough texture of the wood surface, trying to stay conscious. You say God told you this? My voice trembled, my throat dry as if filled with sand. Noah nodded, his eyes holding a light I had never seen before, the light of faith, pure and burning. Yes, the Lord God appeared to me personally, telling me to build an ark, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. I tried to imagine the scale of such a ship, but my brain seemed unable to process such enormous numbers. 300 cubits. How long would that be? The largest ship I had ever seen was only a few dozen cubits long, and that was at the seashore. This is too big, I murmured. How much wood would be needed? How many people? How much time? 0. 5. Noah approached me, his eyes holding a pleading quality. This is why I need your help. I've heard that you are not only skilled, but also righteous. This work requires not just skill, but faith and perseverance. I felt my heartbeat accelerating, blood rushing through my vessels with a slight humming sound. My palms began to sweat, making my grip on the tools slippery. This was a moment that would change destiny. I could feel it. If a flood really is coming, I said carefully, then building such a ship would indeed be necessary. But Noah, sir, such a project would require enormous resources and manpower. Do you have sufficient funds? Noah smiled, a smile full of confidence. God will provide everything needed. I have already begun preparations, and my sons will help. But I need experienced craftsmen to guide the specific construction work. I paced back and forth in the workshop, my footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Each step was heavy, as if adding weight to the decision I was about to make. My thoughts surged like a tide. If what he said was true, if a flood really was coming, then refusing this request would be like refusing the chance to save lives. But if this was just the delusion of a madman, then I would waste enormous time and energy. How long do you need to consider? Noah asked, his voice calm, without any sense of urgency. I stopped pacing and looked into his eyes. In those deep eyes, I saw honesty, determination, and a peace that transcended ordinary understanding. This was not the gaze of a madman. This was the gaze of someone who had truly heard God's voice. I don't need to consider. I heard myself say, my voice more firm than I had expected. I am willing to help you. Relief spread across Noah's face as he reached out to grasp my hand. His hand was warm and strong, and as we shook hands, I could feel the calluses on his palm and the strength in his fingers. These were hands that had done countless tasks, hands worthy of trust. Thank God, and thank you, Enoch, he said. Tomorrow I will take you to see the construction site, and then we can begin making detailed plans. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep for a long time. Moonlight streamed through the window onto my face, silver light dancing on my eyelids. I could hear the chirping of night birds in the distance, and occasionally a breeze would blow, bringing the scent of grass from the fields. My mind kept returning to Noah's words. A ship 300 cubits long, a great flood, God's command. It all sounded so incredible, but somehow there was a strange peace in my heart. Perhaps this was the power of faith. Perhaps this was the feeling of being chosen to participate in a divine mission. Early the next morning, before dawn had fully broken, Noah came to my workshop. The air in the morning twilight was fresh and cool, carrying the moisture of dew and the warmth of approaching daylight. We walked out of the village together, heading toward the construction site he had chosen. Along the way, Noah told me more details about this ship. It needed to be not only large enough to accommodate various animals, but also strong enough to withstand the impact of flood waters. The hull would be divided into 3 levels, each with sufficient space and ventilation equipment. Animals? I asked. What kind of animals? 7 pairs of every clean animal and 1 pair of unclean animals, Noah replied, his tone as if discussing something quite ordinary. Also various birds, reptiles, all living creatures with the breath of life. I tried to imagine the scene on the ship, lions and sheep on the same vessel, eagles and doves sharing the same sky. It sounded like a beautiful dream, but also like an impossible task. We walked for about an hour and came to an open plain. The terrain here was flat, surrounded by small hills, forming a natural basin. The ground was solid rock, covered with a thin layer of soil, with sparse vegetation growing on it. "This is the place," Noah said, spreading his arms as if to embrace heaven and earth. "God instructed me to build the ark here." I surveyed the surroundings with a professional eye, evaluating this location. The foundation was solid. This was important, able to bear the weight of the massive hull. There was sufficient space around for construction work and convenient passages for transporting materials. Most importantly, this place was relatively secluded, not attracting too much unnecessary attention. "An excellent choice," I nodded. "We need to first level the ground, then build work platforms and sheds for storing materials." In the following days, we began intensive preparation work. Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, also joined us. Shem was the eldest, in his 30s, steady in character and very organized in his work. Ham was slightly younger but very strong, able to carry heavy loads. Japheth was the youngest and most energetic, always full of enthusiasm. The first thing we did was create detailed construction plans. I used charcoal to draw the ship's design on a smooth stone slab, marking the dimensions and structure of each part. The hull was rectangular, with a slightly curved bottom to increase stability. The sides and bottom of the ship required the thickest planks, and the interior of the cabin needed complex support structures. "This area needs special reinforcement." I pointed to a certain part of the diagram. "When the hull bears enormous pressure, these places are most likely to have problems." Noah carefully studied the blueprints, nodding from time to time. Though he wasn't a professional carpenter, he had a natural intuition for construction. "How big should the windows be here?" he asked. "Not too big, or it will affect the hull's strength, but not too small either, or ventilation will be poor." I marked the position and size of windows on the diagram. "I suggest opening a small window every 10 cubits, using thick wooden boards for shutters that can be completely sealed when necessary. Procuring materials was another enormous challenge. We needed large quantities of gopher wood, timber. This timber was hard and durable, but expensive and difficult to obtain. Noah sent his sons to various places to search for and purchase timber, while I was responsible for inspecting the quality of the wood. When each piece of timber arrived, I would carefully examine it. I would run my hands over the wood's surface, feeling its grain and hardness. Good gopher wood had fine, dense grain, uniform color, and made a clear sound when struck. I would use a small knife to shave a small piece from the end of the timber, observing the wood's density and moisture content. This one won't do. I pointed to a piece of timber that looked quite good. Look here, there are insect holes, and the wood is soft. Using timber like this to build a ship would fall apart in rough seas. Shem was somewhat puzzled, but this timber looks fine, and the price is cheap. I shook my head and picked up a piece of high-quality timber for comparison. Tapped both pieces of timber and listened to the difference in sound. Shem did as I said and quickly heard the difference. Good timber produced a clear, resonant sound, while inferior timber made a dull, short sound. In building God's ark, we cannot be careless in the slightest, I said seriously. Every piece of timber, every joint, every nail relates to the safety of countless lives. As materials continued to arrive, our construction site became increasingly busy. We built several large sheds to store timber, categorizing and arranging it according to different specifications and uses. Every morning, when the first rays of sunlight hit the construction site, we began our day's work. Construction work began with the ship's bottom. We first had to make the keel, which was the spine of the entire ship. The keel had to be made from the finest timber and be absolutely straight. We selected a massive piece of gopher wood, 30 cubits long, as thick as a pillar, so heavy it required more than 10 people to move it. Making the keel was extremely precise work. We had to use the sharpest tools to gradually remove excess material until it formed the perfect shape. Every cut had to be precise, because any tiny deviation would affect the entire ship's structure. I knelt beside the keel, using the finest plane to repeatedly plane the wood surface. Wood shavings curled and danced beneath my plane, each one thin as a cicada's wing. My arms ached from the repetitive motion, but I dared not slacken in the slightest. Sweat dripped from my forehead onto the wood, quickly absorbed by the timber. "Enoch, take a rest." Noah approached, offering me a bowl of clear water. I accepted the water bowl and drank deeply. The water was sweet, carrying the fragrance of mountain springs. I wiped my face with my wet hands, feeling the coolness of water droplets on my skin. "Can't rest too long," I said. "The keel must be completed while the timber is still fresh, or the wood will warp when it dries." Noah nodded, understanding the importance of craftsmanship. "Do you need my help?" I shook my head. Making the keel requires absolute precision. Having more people would actually increase the chance of error. You go check on the preparation of other components. As work progressed, our team continued to expand. Some young people from the village heard about our project, and those skeptical about the purpose of building a giant ship were attracted by the generous wages and joined our crew. Among them was a young man named Asher, originally a blacksmith with great strength, who learned quickly. I taught him how to use woodworking tools, how to judge wood quality, and how to make various joints. "Why build such a big ship?" Asher asked while working. "There's no ocean here." I stopped my work and looked at this honest young man. His eyes held confusion, but no mockery. "Do you believe in God, Asher?" "Of course I do," he answered without hesitation. "My parents taught me from childhood to fear God." "Then, if God asked you to do something that seemed impossible, what would you do?" Asher thought for a moment. "I think I would obey God's will." "That's what we're doing now," I said. "Perhaps we cannot fully understand God's plan, but we can faithfully execute it." From then on, Asher worked even more earnestly. He no longer asked why, but concentrated on learning every skill and completing every task. The ship's framework was the most critical part of the construction process. We had to make hundreds of ribs, each precisely crafted according to design specifications. These ribs would support the entire hull, bearing pressure from all directions. Making ribs required special skills. We had to first make templates, then cut timber according to the templates. Each rib was composed of several pieces of timber joined together, with connections using specially made mortise and tenon joints that ensured both strength and water tightness. I personally made the first rib as a standard for others. I selected a piece of excellent gopher wood, used an incline to mark cutting lines, then carefully sawed with a saw. The saw moved through the timber with a rhythmic swishing sound, wood chips falling like snow. After cutting was complete, I began making the mortise and tenon joints. This was the most skilled testing part. The tenon and mortise had to fit perfectly, neither too loose nor too tight. I used a chisel to gradually hollow out the mortise, controlling the force and angle of each cut. "Master, is this angle correct?" Asher asked, holding up a tenon he had made. I carefully examined it and nodded. "Very good, but this area needs a bit more adjustment. Remember, mortise and tenon joints are the guarantee of the hull's strength. There can be no carelessness whatsoever." As more and more ribs were completed, the ship's outline began to emerge. From a distance, those upright timber frameworks looked like the skeleton of a massive animal, both magnificent and somewhat mysterious. People in the village began to notice our project. At first, they only watched curiously from afar, but later some bold people came closer to inquire. When they heard we were building a giant ship, reactions varied. Some expressed amazement. "Such a big ship. How much money must it cost?" Some expressed doubt. "What's the use of building such a big ship? It can't be transported to the sea." Others directly mocked. "Noah has gone mad, building a ship on dry land. What a waste of money." Faced with these doubts and mockery, Noah always remained calm. He never argued with anyone, just continued to work with concentration. Sometimes I would see him standing alone beside the ship, looking up at the sky, his lips moving slightly, as if praying. "Don't you care about what others think?" I asked Noah one evening. Noah shook his head. "God's will is higher than human thoughts. When the flood comes, they will understand." What if the flood doesn't come?" I asked carefully. Noah looked at me, his eyes holding an unwavering light. God is faithful, and his word will surely be fulfilled. As the project progressed, we encountered more and more technical challenges. Sealing the hull was the greatest difficulty among them. We not only had to ensure tight joints between planks, but also prevent expansion and contraction of timber after long immersion in water. I remembered a method my father had once told me, mixing pine resin with hemp fiber to create sealing material. Pine resin had excellent waterproof properties, while hemp fiber could fill small gaps. We collected large quantities of pine resin and boiled it over fire until it became a viscous liquid. Then we added chopped hemp fiber and stirred evenly. This mixture would become very hard when cooled, but still maintain some elasticity. This is it. I showed Noah a piece of cooled sealing material. We fill this into the joints between planks, then apply another layer of pine resin on the outside, ensuring absolute watertightness. Noah carefully examined this piece of material, pressing it with his fingers to feel its hardness and elasticity. This is truly God's grace, inspiring you with this method. The sealing work was an extremely tedious process. We had to check every joint, clear out wood chips and debris, then fill in sealing material. This work required enormous patience and care. Any oversight could lead to water entering the hull. I knelt at the ship's bottom, using a small knife to clean the joints. The space at the bottom was very narrow, requiring me to bend over, sometimes even crawl forward. Sweat constantly dripped from my forehead, my clothes soaked with perspiration and clinging to my body. But I dare not slacken in the slightest, because the bottom was the most likely place for water to enter. "Master, this joint here is a bit wide," Asher called from the other end of the ship. I crawled over to check. Indeed, this joint was wider than others. "No problem. We'll fill it with more sealing material, then add a reinforcing plate on the outside." Just like this, we checked inch by inch, sealed joint by joint. The entire process took nearly a month, but when the last joint was sealed, we all felt a tremendous sense of accomplishment. As the hull construction neared completion, we began making the interior structures of the cabin. According to God's instructions, the ship was to be divided into 3 levels, each with sufficient space to accommodate different animals. The bottom level was mainly for storing food and fresh water. We made numerous wooden boxes and clay jars to store various grains, dried fruits, and preserved meats. These foods had to be preservable for a long time, because we didn't know how long the flood would last. The middle level was the living area for large animals. We built many enclosures, each with sufficient space for animals to move around. The enclosure railings were made from sturdy wooden bars, with appropriate spacing to ensure ventilation while preventing animals from escaping. The top level was the living area for small animals and birds. We made countless cages of various sizes, suitable for different types of animals. Each cage had a small door for convenient feeding and cleaning. When making these interior structures, we had to consider the habits and needs of animals. Carnivores and herbivores had to be housed separately, and fierce animals required stronger enclosures. We also had to consider ventilation, drainage, cleaning, and various other practical issues. "What about these lions and tigers?" Ham asked. "Won't they attack other animals?" "God will make them peaceful," Noah replied. "On the ark, all animals will coexist peacefully." Though I had some doubts about this, I still made the corresponding facilities according to Noah's requirements. We made especially strong enclosures for large carnivores, using the thickest wooden bars and the most secure joints. The top of the ship needed a skylight for lighting and ventilation. This skylight design was very complex, needing to ensure sufficient light and air circulation while preventing rainwater from flooding in. I designed a multi-layered skylight structure, with the outermost layer being wooden boards that could open and close, the middle layer being fine mesh, and the innermost layer being adjustable louvers. This design could be flexibly adjusted according to weather conditions, ensuring ventilation while preventing invasion by severe weather. Making the skylight was precise work, with every component needing to fit exactly. I personally made all the key components, ensuring they could open and close smoothly. "Try it," I said to Japheth. Japheth pulled the rope, and the skylight slowly opened. Sunlight immediately poured into the cabin, illuminating the interior structure. A breeze also blew in, bringing fresh air. "Excellent!" Japheth exclaimed excitedly. "Now the animals won't feel stuffy." After nearly 2 years of hard work, the Ark was finally nearing completion. This massive ship stood on the plain like a moving mountain peak. Its length exceeded any building I had ever seen. Its height enough to make people look up in awe. The hull presented a deep brown luster, too, the characteristic color of gopher wood gleaming in the sunlight. I stood beside the ship, running my hands over the smooth hull surface. The timber was warm and solid under my palms, every inch condensed with our heart's blood and sweat. I could feel the wood's grain. Those fine annual rings recorded the years of the tree's growth, and now they would witness an even greater historical moment. "Enoch, what do you think?" Noah approached me, his voice carrying deep satisfaction. I carefully surveyed this giant ship, from bow to stern, from deck to hull bottom. Every detail had been crafted with our meticulous care. "It's perfect, Noah. This is the greatest project I've ever seen in my lifetime." Noah nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "Thank God, and thank you and everyone who helped us. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Just then, a strange sound came from the sky. I looked up and saw a dark shadow appearing on the distant horizon. The shadow grew closer and closer, gradually revealing its true nature. It was a flock of birds, all kinds of birds, countless in number. The flock flew in perfect formation, as if responding to some summons. There were eagles, doves, sparrows, swallows, and many birds I couldn't name. Their wings gleamed in the sunlight, feathers displaying various beautiful colors. "They're coming," Noah said softly, his voice filled with awe. The flock circled above the Ark several times, then began to land in an orderly fashion. Large birds landed on the deck, small birds on the ship's rails, each species automatically finding a position suitable for itself. Even more miraculous, they began voluntarily walking toward the cages we had prepared for them. I watched in amazement. These wild birds, who would normally fly away at the sight of humans, were now so docile, so obedient. A beautiful peacock walked up to me, looked at me with his bright eyes, then gently called out, as if thanking me. How is this possible?" Asher stammered. "How do they know to come here?" "God is guiding them," Noah replied, his voice full of reverence. "God promised to preserve the lives of all living creatures, and now he is fulfilling his promise." In the following days, various animals began arriving one after another. First came small animals, rabbits, squirrels, hedgehogs. They hopped and bounded to the front of the ark, fearlessly walking aboard. Then came medium-sized animals, sheep, goats, deer. They came in groups, orderly and organized. Most shocking was the arrival of large animals. One morning, the earth began to tremble slightly. We walked out of the cabin and saw dust flying in the distance. A herd of elephants was slowly approaching. Their steps were heavy and powerful, each step making the earth shake. Leading them was a massive bull elephant with ivory white as jade, gleaming in the sunlight. The elephant stopped in front of the ark, and the bull elephant touched the hull with his long trunk, as if checking whether the ship was sturdy enough. Then he let out a deep roar, and the other elephants began boarding in an orderly fashion. The enclosures we had specially built for elephants were spacious, with floors covered in thick, dry grass. After the elephants entered the enclosures, they immediately quieted down and began leisurely eating grass. "They're really intelligent," I said to Noah. "It's as if they know this place is for their protection." "All animals have instincts given to them by God," Noah replied. "In this special moment, God is awakening the wisdom deep in their hearts." The arrival of lions and tigers was the most nerve-wracking moment. These large carnivores were normally kings of the forest, fierce beyond measure. But when they approached the ark, they displayed unusual docility. A male lion walked up to me, looked at me with his golden eyes, then gently wagged his tail like a big cat. I carefully reached out my hand to stroke his mane. The lion's fur was coarse but warm. He made soft purring sounds, clearly enjoying this stroking. This experience made me feel both excited and incredulous. Even lions have become so docile, I said to myself. This truly is a miracle. The arrival of various animals made the ark lively. The cabin was filled with all kinds of sounds. Birds chirping, sheep bleating, cattle lowing, horses neighing. These sounds mixed together, forming a peculiar symphony. Caring for these animals was a massive undertaking. We had to prepare food for them, clean their living environments, and ensure their health and safety. Noah's entire family participated in this work, each person having their own area of responsibility. I was mainly responsible for checking the hull's condition, ensuring all facilities were functioning normally. Every morning, I would patrol the entire ship, checking for any damage, any equipment needing repair. One day, while inspecting the storage rooms on the bottom level, I discovered a small problem. A wooden box storing grain had a tiny crack at the bottom, though not large. If not repaired promptly, it could cause the grain to become damp and spoil. I immediately found tools and began repairing this crack. I first used a small knife to clean debris from the crack, then filled it with sealing material, finally pasting a thin piece of wood on the outside. The entire process was meticulous, requiring enormous patience. "Master, do you need help?" Asher approached and asked. "No need. This kind of precise work is better done by myself," I said while working. "You go check the other storage boxes to see if there are any similar problems." Asher nodded and began carefully checking other storage facilities. Through our joint efforts, all small problems were discovered and resolved in time. As more and more animals boarded, the ark's weight was also constantly increasing. I began worrying whether the foundation could bear such enormous weight. Every night, I would check the support structures at the ship's bottom, ensuring there were no signs of deformation or cracking. Fortunately, the foundation we had initially chosen was very solid, and the ship's design was also reasonable with evenly distributed weight. The support beams at the ship's bottom bore enormous pressure, but still maintained perfect condition. "It looks like our design was correct," I said to Noah. "The hull structure is very stable and can bear this weight." Noah nodded, but his expression was somewhat grave. "Enoch, I feel God's time is approaching. The weather is beginning to change, and there's an unusual atmosphere in the air." I looked up at the sky. Indeed, the weather had been abnormal recently. The clouds had become heavy, darker in color than usual. The air was filled with an oppressive feeling, like the calm before a storm. "Is there anything else we need to prepare?" I asked. "All preparation work has been completed," Noah answered. "Now we just need to wait for God's timing." That night, I lay in the cabin, listening to the sounds of various animals outside. These sounds had become part of my life, making me feel secure and warm. I thought back to the scene 2 years ago, when Noah first came to my workshop. At that time, I could never have imagined participating in such a great project. The next morning, I was awakened by a strange sound. It wasn't the call of animals, but a low rumbling, like the earth groaning. I quickly got up and walked to the deck to check the situation. The sky had become unusually dark, with heavy clouds pressing low, almost touching the mountaintops. The air was filled with an electric charge, making my skin feel prickly. In the distance on the horizon, lightning danced within the clouds, though I couldn't yet hear thunder. That power was already awe-inspiring. "Noah!" I shouted loudly. "Come quickly and see!" Noah soon appeared on deck, his face very serious. He looked up at the sky, then slowly nodded. "The time has come. God is about to begin his judgment." Just then, I felt the earth beneath my feet begin to tremble slightly. This trembling was rhythmic, like the earth's heartbeat. As the trembling intensified, I heard a sound I had never heard before. It was a roar from deep underground, as if some enormous force was awakening. "What is this?" Asher asked in terror, his voice trembling. "It's the fountains of the great deep," Noah answered, his voice calm but with deep reverence in his eyes. "God said he would break open the fountains of the great deep, and the windows of heaven would also be opened." Suddenly, a strange phenomenon appeared on the distant hillside. The ground began to crack, and clear streams of water gushed from the fissures. At first, they were only thin streams, but quickly became rushing springs. This phenomenon appears simultaneously in various places, as if the entire earth was gushing forth water. At the same time, the clouds in the sky began to churn, lightning becoming more frequent and intense. Thunder began coming from the distance, deep and shocking, making even hearts tremble. "Everyone into the cabin," Noah commanded loudly. "God is about to close the door of the ark." We quickly checked that all animals were safely in their living areas. Every enclosure, every cage, I had to personally confirm. This was the final check. There could be no oversights whatsoever. "The animals on the bottom level are all safe," Ham reported. "The middle level is also fine," Shem said. The birds on the top level are all in their cages, Japheth added. I made one final check of the hull's ceiling, ensuring all joints were intact. Then we closed the cabin door, securing it from inside with thick wooden bolts. The cabin suddenly became quiet, with only the soft sounds of animals and our own breathing. The thunder outside became clearer, each clap like hammering on our hearts. Now we can only trust in God, Noah said, his voice particularly clear in the enclosed cabin. We gathered together, and Noah began to pray. His voice was low and reverent, every word filled with trust and reverence for God. Though I wasn't a particularly devout person, in this moment, I too felt a power beyond human understanding. After the prayer ended, we began to wait. The sounds outside grew louder, thunder, wind, water sounds mixed together, forming an unprecedented symphony. I could feel the ark beginning to sway slightly, which meant the water level was rising. "The water is coming," I said softly. Through the skylight, we could see the situation outside. Rain began to fall, but this wasn't ordinary rain. It was a torrential downpour. The raindrops were large and dense, hitting the hull with dull pounding sounds. The sky seemed torn open with a huge gash, water pouring down from heaven without any sign of stopping. At the same time, springs on the ground continued gushing forth. We could see distant hillsides, already submerged by water, the water level rising rapidly. Those familiar landmarks disappeared one by one beneath the water. "We're really going to float," Asher exclaimed, his voice containing both fear and excitement. As the water level rose, the ark began truly floating on the water's surface. This feeling was strange, as if the entire world was gently swaying. The hull maintained stability in the water, proving the correctness of our design. I walked to the ship's rail and looked out through a small window. Outside was a vast ocean, with no trace of land visible. Rain continued falling, sky and water's surface merging into one, impossible to distinguish where sky ended and water began. "This really is a flood," I said to myself. Everything Noah said was true. In the following days, rain continued falling. Not ordinary showers, but continuous torrential rain. Every day, every night, the sound of rain echoed in our ears, becoming the background music of our lives. Caring for the animals became our main work. Though the ship swayed in the water, the animals seemed well adapted to this environment. They stayed quietly in their respective living areas, rarely making noisy sounds. This supernatural calm made our work much easier. I patrolled the entire ship daily, checking the operation of various facilities. The ventilation system worked normally, ensuring air circulation in the cabin. The drainage system was also effective, promptly removing accumulated water. Most importantly, the hull's sealing performance was perfect, with no signs of leakage. "Our engineering has withstood the test," I said to Noah. "The hull is solid, and all systems are operating normally." Noah nodded, but his expression remained serious. "This is just the beginning. The flood will continue for a long time. We must remain vigilant, ensuring every detail is perfect." As time passed, I began adapting to life on the water. The ark swayed gently in the waves, like a huge cradle. This swaying had a hypnotic effect, making people feel secure and relaxed. Sometimes I would stand on deck, gazing into the distance through the rain curtain. Outside was a completely unfamiliar world. No mountains, no trees, no houses, only endless waters. This scene was both magnificent and awe-inspiring, making me deeply feel God's power. "What are you thinking about?" Noah approached and asked. "I'm thinking about the world outside," I replied. "Those people, those animals, all the familiar things, where are they now?" Noah was silent for a while, then said, "God is righteous and also loving. He gave people sufficient time to repent, but they chose to continue sinning. This flood is judgment, but also a new beginning." I nodded. Though questions remained in my heart, I could understand Noah's words. In this special moment, we were chosen survivors, bearing the mission of rebuilding the world. The rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights, then finally stopped. When we first heard the silence without rain, that feeling was strange. We had grown accustomed to the rain's accompaniment. The sudden quiet actually made us feel uncomfortable. "The rain has stopped," Japheth said excitedly. "Can we go out now?" Noah shook his head. "Not yet. The water hasn't receded, and God hasn't instructed us when to go out." Through the skylight, we could see the sky outside. The clouds began to scatter, revealing the long-missed blue sky. Sunlight streamed through cloud gaps, forming beautiful light spots on the water's surface. This was the first time we had seen sunlight in a long while, and that warm feeling lifted our spirits. However, the water level remained high, with no sign of land visible. Our ark was like a leaf, drifting on the boundless ocean. "How long will we stay here?" Asher asked. "Until God tells us we can go out," Noah replied. "We must wait patiently." Waiting was a test. Though we had sufficient food and fresh water, and life on the ship was comfortable, the feeling of being trapped in an enclosed space was still oppressive. Especially for someone like me, accustomed to free living, this restriction sometimes made me feel restless. To ease this emotion, I began focusing more intently on caring for the animals. I discovered that being with these animals could bring inner peace. They didn't have humans' complex emotions, just lived simply, eating, sleeping, occasionally making some sounds. This simple way of life taught me to cherish the present tranquility. One day, while feeding a flock of sheep, I noticed one ewe's belly was much larger than the others. I observed carefully and realized it might be about to give birth. "Noah!" I called excitedly. "A sheep is about to give birth!" This was the first time an animal would give birth on the ark, holding special significance for us. We carefully prepared a quiet corner for the ewe, laying soft, dry grass. The birthing process went smoothly, and the ewe delivered a healthy lamb. The newborn lamb was wet all over, but was quickly cleaned by its mother. It struggled to stand up, wobbling toward its mother's udder. "New life," Noah said softly, tears glistening in his eyes. "This is a symbol of hope that God has given us." Watching this newborn little life, I felt unprecedented emotion. In this world covered by flood, life still continued, hope still passed on. This filled me with confidence for the future. As time passed, other animals on the ark successively gave birth. Little birds, little rabbits, little pigs, various young ones brought new vitality to our lives. Caring for these young became our new work and brought new joy. One day, Noah decided to release a raven to see the situation outside. We opened the skylight, and the raven flew out. It circled above the ark several times, then flew toward the distance. We waited a long time, but the raven didn't return. This made us somewhat worried, not knowing what situation it had encountered. Perhaps it found a place to perch, Noah said. Let's try a dove. 7 days later, Noah released a dove. This dove quickly returned, but it brought nothing back. This indicated there was still no suitable dry land outside. Another 7 days passed, and Noah again released the same dove. This time, the dove returned with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. An olive leaf, I shouted excitedly. This means the water level has dropped, and trees are beginning to emerge from the water. Seeing that green olive leaf, we all felt tremendous joy. This was the first time in a long while we had seen green vegetation from the outside world. It represented hope, represented a new beginning. Another 7 days passed, and Noah released the dove for the third time. This time, the dove didn't return. This meant it had found a suitable place to perch. The outside world was recovering. The water has receded, Noah said, but we still need to wait for God's instruction. After some more time, Noah lifted the covering of the ark, and we saw the outside world for the first time. The water level had indeed dropped considerably, and mountaintops could be seen emerging from the water in the distance, but the earth was still muddy, not yet suitable for living. Finally, God spoke to Noah, telling him he could bring his family and all the animals out of the ark. Hearing this news, we were all extremely excited. "We're free!" Asher cheered. However, leaving the ark wasn't a simple matter. We had to orderly send all animals out of the ship, ensuring their safety. This process would take a long time and required enormous patience. We first released the birds. When the cabin door opened, various birds couldn't wait to fly out. They circled in the air, making joyful calls, then flew in all directions. Watching their free-flying figures, I felt deep satisfaction. Next were the small animals, rabbits, squirrels, hedgehogs. They hopped and bounded out of the cabin, quickly disappearing into distant bushes. Their longing for freedom was so intense, reminding me of my own desire for freedom. The departure of medium-sized animals required more organization. Flocks of sheep and deer walked down from the ark in groups, heading toward distant grasslands. Watching their retreating figures, I knew they would multiply and thrive in the new world. Finally came the large animals. The elephants slowly walked out of the cabin, their steps still heavy and powerful. The lead bull elephant looked back at the ark, as if bidding us farewell, then led the herd toward the distance. The lions and tigers also regained their wildness. When they walked out of the cabin, their eyes rekindled with wild light, but they didn't attack anyone. Instead, quietly left the ark and disappeared into distant mountains and forests. When the last animal left the ark, I felt tremendous accomplishment, along with deep reluctance. These animals had accompanied us for so long. Now they were returning to the world that belonged to them. "Our mission is complete," Noah said, his voice containing satisfaction and reflection. I nodded, looking at the empty cabin. This ark, that had once been full of life, was now quiet, but it had completed its mission. It had not only saved countless lives, but also witnessed God's faithfulness and love. We walked out of the ark and stepped onto the new earth. The ground beneath our feet was still somewhat moist, but very solid. The air was fresh and sweet, carrying the fragrance of rain-soaked soil. Sunlight warmly shone on our faces, reminding me of the beautiful times before the flood. Noah built an altar on a flat area and offered sacrifices to God. Smoke slowly rose, dissipating in the blue sky. This was our thanksgiving to God, thanking Him for His salvation and protection. "Enoch," Noah said to me, "thank you for your help these years. Without you, the ark couldn't have been built, and we couldn't have survived this flood." I shook my head. This was God's work. I was just a tool in His hands. Being able to participate in such a project is the honor of my lifetime. We stood before the altar for a long time, silently thanking God for His grace. Then we began planning our new lives. This world needed rebuilding, new houses, new tools, everything new. "Would you like to continue working with us?" Noah asked. "This new world needs experienced craftsmen." I looked at the distant mountains, at the blue sky and white clouds, feeling new hope surge in my heart. "Of course I'm willing. We're going to build a better world." Thus, we began our lives in the new world. I used my skills to help Noah's family build new houses and make new tools. Asher also stayed, continuing to learn carpentry from me. As time passed, other survivors joined us. We established new villages, cultivated new fields. Animals multiplied in the wild, and the earth was once again full of life. Whenever I saw descendants of animals we had once cared for, a special feeling would surge in my heart. They were survivors of the flood, hope for the new world. Sometimes, I would return to where the ark was moored. That giant ship still lay there quietly. Though we no longer needed its protection, it remained a witness to those extraordinary years we had experienced. I would run my hands over the hull's surface, feeling those familiar textures. Every wood grain recorded our labor. Every joint condensed our wisdom. This ship was not just a refuge, but a masterpiece of cooperation between God and humanity. "Master, you've come here again," Asher's voice came from behind. He was now an excellent carpenter, his skills even surpassing mine in my youth. "Yes." I turned to look at this apprentice I had personally trained. Every time I come here, I think of those days. That was the most meaningful time of my life. Asher walked beside me, also running his hands over the hull. "Back then, I thought you were crazy, building such a big ship on dry land. Now thinking about it, if not for this ship, none of us would be here." We stood there quietly, listening to the wind blowing over the hull, making soft sounds. That sound was like the ark gently telling its story, recounting that legendary experience of saving lives. "Master," Asher suddenly asked, "do you think there will be such a flood again?" I looked at the rainbow in the sky. That was the sign of God's covenant with Noah, promising never again to destroy the world with flood. No, God has already promised, but this doesn't mean we can forget the lesson from this time. What lesson? Fear God and act righteously," I replied. The flood wasn't God's anger, but God's love. He gave humanity a chance to start anew. As the new world developed, my reputation also spread. People called me the builder of the ark. Though I repeatedly explained I was only Noah's assistant, people still preferred to call me that. More and more young people came to learn carpentry from me. I taught them everything I knew without reservation: how to choose timber, how to use tools, how to design structures, how to ensure quality. "Remember," I told my students, "we're not just making objects, we're creating. Every piece of work must be done with heart, because they will serve people's lives, and some might even save lives." I especially emphasized the importance of quality. Never neglect quality because of urgency to finish. A small flaw might lead to the failure of an entire project. The ark could withstand the flood's test because we strived for perfection in every detail. Year after year, I watched the new world gradually prosper under our efforts. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. People built beautiful houses, opened fertile farmlands, domesticated various animals. However, I also noticed some worrying changes. As life improved, some people began becoming proud and complacent. They forgot the flood's lesson, forgot God's grace. "We need to remind people to remember history," I said to Noah. Noah nodded, his hair completely gray now, but his eyes still clear. "Yes, every generation needs to hear this story, needs to understand God's love and righteousness." So we began regularly gathering people to tell the story of the flood. I would describe in detail the process of building the ark, describe how animals miraculously gathered, describe the flood's power and God's salvation. The rain then wasn't ordinary rain, I told the gathered crowd, but judgment pouring down from heaven. But God still preserved love in judgment, preparing the ark of salvation for the righteous. Children always listened most attentively, their eyes full of curiosity and awe. I especially enjoyed answering their questions because their questions were often the most direct and pure. "Grandpa Enoch, did the lions really not eat other animals?" a little boy asked. "Really not," I replied. "On the ark, all animals lived in peace. This was God's miracle and a preview of the future world." "What's a preview?" another child asked. I thought for a moment, explaining in words they could understand. A preview means showing in advance what will happen in the future. The peaceful life on the ark previewed that in God's future kingdom, all creation will live in harmony. As I aged, my body began to weaken, but my heart grew younger. Whenever I saw young craftsmen creating beautiful works, whenever I heard children listening intently to the flood story, I felt immense satisfaction. I knew my time was limited, but I wasn't afraid of death. I had completed the mission God gave me. I had seen the hope of the new world. My skills would be passed on through my students, and the flood story would be transmitted through generations. One evening, I came alone to the ark's side. This had become my habit. The setting sun cast golden light on the hull, making it look even more solemn and sacred. I sat beside the ship, recalling my experiences over the years. From first meeting Noah, to completing the ark's construction, to the flood's coming and receding, to building the new world, 2D. Every detail clearly emerged in my mind. Thank God, I prayed softly. Thank you for letting me participate in such a great project. Thank you for saving countless lives through my hands. A gentle breeze carried the fragrance of distant fields. I heard birds returning to their nests chirping, heard cattle and sheep returning to pens with their bells, heard children playing and laughing. These sounds wove together, forming the New World's symphony. Master, Asher's voice came from the distance. Time to come home for dinner. I slowly stood up, taking one last look at the ark. In the sunset's glow, it was like a golden mountain peak, quietly guarding this land. Goodbye, old friend, I said softly to the ark. Thank you for carrying us through those difficult years. I turned toward the village, my steps not as light as in youth, but my heart filled with peace and joy. I knew that wherever I went, the ark's spirit would accompany me. Faith, perseverance, reverence for God, and love for life. Night fell, and stars began twinkling in the sky. I lay in my bed, listening to the peaceful night sounds outside. This was a peaceful night. No storms, no floods, only God's grace like dew nourishing the earth. I closed my eyes, my heart full of gratitude. I was an ordinary carpenter, but God used my hands to accomplish extraordinary work. I witnessed God's power, experienced God's salvation, participated in God's plan. In my dreams, I returned to those days of building the ark. I saw my young figure busy at the construction site, saw Noah's determined eyes, saw animals living peacefully on the ship, saw the earth regaining life after the flood receded. These images were so real, so beautiful, I didn't want to wake up. But I knew true beauty wasn't in dreams, but in reality. The new world was becoming more beautiful through our efforts. God's plan was being realized step by step. When I opened my eyes again, day had already dawned. Sunlight streamed through the window into the room, bringing hope for a new day. I slowly sat up, feeling every part of my body. Though aged, I still thanked God for giving me a healthy body and clear mind. A new day begins, I said to myself. There's still much work to do, many stories to tell. I got up and dressed, walking out of the room. The world outside was full of life, birds singing, flowers blooming, people working diligently. This was the new world we had built with blood and sweat. This was the second chance God had given us. I walked toward my workshop, where my tools awaited, my unfinished works, and young apprentices waiting for my guidance. Though I was no longer young, my skills and experience were still useful. My stories still needed telling. Good morning, Master. Asher was already waiting in the workshop, with several new apprentices beside him. Good morning, children, I replied. What shall we learn today? Master, a young apprentice said, we want to hear you tell the ark story again. I smiled. This request I would never refuse. All right, but before telling stories, let's learn some basic skills first. Remember, good craftsmen need not only good stories, but also good skills. 0. 5. I picked up a piece of wood and began demonstrating how to properly use a plane. Wood shavings curled and danced beneath my plane, just as they had years ago when building the ark. Look, I told the apprentices, every stroke must be steady, precise, and strong. Every wood shaving must be uniform. This isn't just technique, but attitude. Your attitude toward work determines the quality of your work. The apprentices carefully observed my every movement, earnestly learning every detail. Seeing their focused expressions, I remembered my younger self, remembered the scene when I first met Noah. "Master," one apprentice asked, "why did you agree to help Noah build the ark? That sounded like an impossible task." I stopped my work and looked at this young man. His eyes held confusion but also eagerness to know the answer. "Because of faith," I replied. "Not faith in my own abilities, but faith in God. When I saw the light in Noah's eyes, I knew he wasn't lying or fantasizing. He truly heard God's voice." "But how could you be certain?" another apprentice asked. "I couldn't be certain," I answered honestly. "At least, not at the beginning. But as work progressed, as miracles appeared one by one, I became more and more convinced this was God's work. The final flood proved everything." I continued working, continuing to narrate. Faith isn't blind belief, but choosing to believe in uncertainty. When we face things beyond our understanding, we need not more evidence, but greater faith. The apprentices nodded thoughtfully. I knew they might not fully understand these words now, but as they grew older and experienced more, they would gradually comprehend. "Now, let's continue learning skills," I said. "Then, I'll tell you more stories about the ark." Thus, each of my days was spent in work and storytelling. I used my hands to create new works, used my voice to spread ancient stories. Every work carried my skills and experience. Every story conveyed God's love and faithfulness. As time flowed, my apprentices one by one became excellent craftsmen. They not only mastered superb skills, but, more importantly, understood a craftsman's responsibility and mission. They knew every work must be made with heart, because they would serve people's lives. Asher became my most accomplished student. He not only had superior skills, but, more importantly, understood the true meaning of the ark's spirit. He often helped me tell the flood story, interpreting that history in his own way. My master taught me not just carpentry skills, Asher told his students, but more importantly, principles of being human. Every work must be worthy of one's conscience, worthy of those who use it. Hearing such words, I felt immense comfort. I knew my spirit would be passed on through these young people, and the ark's story would spread to more distant places through their voices. One day, a merchant from afar found me. He had heard the ark's story and wanted to see that legendary ship with his own eyes. "Was that really God's work?" he asked, his eyes full of curiosity and awe. "Yes," I replied. "Though built by our hands, the design came from God, the strength came from God, and the final success belongs to God." I took him to where the ark was moored. Many years had passed, and the ark remained solid. Though the surface had been weathered by wind and rain, the structure was still intact. The merchant walked around the ark, carefully observing every detail. "Truly incredible," he marveled. "Such a big ship was actually built on dry land." "We also found it incredible at the time," I said. "But God's plans often exceed human understanding. We just need to faithfully execute them. The results will naturally be revealed." The merchant nodded, then asked, "What meaning do you think this story has for our current lives?" This was a good question. I thought for a while before answering. This story tells us that God is faithful. His word will surely be fulfilled. At the same time, it reminds us to fear God and act righteously. Most importantly, it gives us hope. No matter how dark the moment, God will prepare a path of salvation for His people. The merchant nodded thoughtfully, then said, I want to take this story back to my hometown. Let more people know God's power and love. That's exactly why we tell this story, I said. To let more people know God, fear God, trust God. As I aged, I began thinking more about life's meaning. I was an ordinary carpenter, but God used me to participate in an extraordinary project. This made me understand that in God's eyes, there are no humble occupations, only faithful service. Whenever night fell deeply, I would sit by the window, gazing at the starry sky. Those stars were like God's eyes, lovingly watching everything on earth. I would remember those nights spent on the ark during the flood, remember how God protected us through those difficult years. God, I prayed softly, thank you for choosing me, this humble carpenter, to participate in your great plan of redemption. Though I don't understand all your mysteries, I believe in your love and faithfulness. In my final years, I spent more time teaching skills and telling stories. I knew my time was limited. I had to pass on everything I knew to the next generation. Remember, I told my students, skills can be taught, but character must be cultivated. A good craftsman needs not only skillful hands, but also a kind heart. Use your skills to serve others and glorify God. I also spend more time organizing detailed records of the ark's construction, hoping future generations could learn useful knowledge from them. I recorded every step, every material, every technique in detail, hoping these experiences could help future builders. Perhaps someday, I said to Asher, people will need to build great ships again, and these records will come in handy. Asher nodded. Master's wisdom will be passed down forever. One spring morning, I felt particularly weak. I knew my time had come, but my heart held no fear, only peace and gratitude. I asked Asher to call all my students together. I wanted to give them final guidance. Children, I said in a weak but clear voice, I must leave you now, but don't be sad, because I'm going to a better place to meet our God. The students gathered around my bed, tears in their eyes. I want to leave you with final words, I continued. Remember the ark's story. Remember God's love. No matter what difficulties you encounter, believe that God has His plan. Use your hands to serve others. Use your lives to glorify God. I looked at each student's face. They were all my pride, all extensions of my life. Asher, I said to my most accomplished student, I'm entrusting the workshop to you. Continue teaching skills. Continue telling stories. Let the ark's spirit be passed down forever. Asher nodded through tears. Master, I will never disappoint you. I closed my eyes, feeling life's final moments. My mind filled with countless beautiful memories. The shock of first meeting Noah, the toil of building the ark, the miracle of animals boarding, the joy after the flood receded, the hope of building the new world. These memories were so clear, so beautiful, making me feel this life hadn't been lived in vain. I was an ordinary carpenter, but I participated in God's great plan. I used my hands to build the ark that saved lives, used my voice to spread God's love. God, I prayed one final time in my heart, thank you for giving me such a rich life. Now I'm returning to you. May your will be done. A gentle breeze blew through the window, bringing flower fragrance and bird songs. Sunlight warmly shone on my face, like God's loving hand caressing me. In such peace, I quietly left this world. My students held a grand funeral for me. People from the entire village came to attend, because I was not only their carpentry master, but also a witness to the ark's story. Master Enoch left us not only superb skills, Asher said at the funeral, but more importantly, an example of faith. He told us that no matter how impossible the task, as long as it's God's will, it can certainly be accomplished. People nodded, tears in their eyes, but also filled with hope. They knew that though I had left, my spirit would forever remain with them. After the funeral, Asher came to the ark's side. This ancient ship still lay there quietly, witnessing that immortal history. Master, Asher said softly, I will continue your work, continue passing on the ark's spirit. May you rest in peace in heaven. A gentle breeze blew, and the ark made soft sounds, as if responding to Asher's words. In the sunset's glow, this ship that carried countless lives and hope appeared even more solemn and sacred. From then on, Asher faithfully fulfilled his promise to me. He not only continued operating the workshop and teaching carpentry skills, but more importantly, continued telling the ark's story and spreading God's love. Whenever someone asked about the ark's builder, Asher would always say, "That was my master Enoch, an ordinary but great carpenter. He used his hands to participate in God's plan of redemption, used his life to witness God's faithfulness." The ark's story was thus passed down generation by generation, inspiring countless people. It told people that God is faithful and his promises will surely be fulfilled. It also told people that no matter how ordinary a person is, as long as they're willing to be used by God, they can participate in God's great plan. And I, the ordinary carpenter Enoch, though I had left this world, my story would be passed down forever. Because this wasn't just my story, but God's story. The story of how he uses humble vessels to accomplish great works. In heaven, I finally met the God I had served all my life. His face was more loving than I had imagined, his voice more gentle than any I had heard. "Well done, good and faithful servant," he said to me. "You were faithful with little, so I will put you in charge of much. Enter into your master's joy." Hearing these words, my heart filled with indescribable joy. I knew my work on earth had been approved by God. My life hadn't been lived in vain. Now, as night falls and stars begin twinkling in the sky, I hope you too can feel that peace and tranquility. Just like those nights we spent on the ark, though the outside world was unknown, our hearts held God's peace. May you dream tonight of that ark carrying hope. Dream of those animals living in harmony. Dream of the earth regaining life after the flood receded. May you feel God's love and protection in your dreams, just as he protected every life on the ark. May your heart also have an ark, providing you refuge in life's storms. May you, like me, use your hands and life to participate in God's plan, serve others, and glorify God. Now, let us enter sweet dreams together. There are no storms, no fears, only God's peace like dew, nourishing our hearts. Good night. May God bless you. May His face shine upon you. May He give you peace. On this quiet night, let the ark's story accompany you into dreamland. Let God's love be your comfort. Let His faithfulness be your hope. No matter what challenges tomorrow may bring, remember, God is faithful, and His promises will surely be fulfilled. May you hear in your dreams the joyful sounds of those saved animals. See the rainbow blooming in the sky. Feel the hope and beauty of the new world. May this story become eternal comfort and strength in your heart. Good night, my dear friend. May God's peace be with you forever and always.